The video today, we will be talking about the vice presidential debate, which is set to occur tomorrow night. This snuck up on us, and of course it was scheduled just about a month ago. I remember it was the beginning of October. This was scheduled, and it is now approaching. Tim Walz and J.D. Vance, Democratic and Republican nominees for Vice President of the United States in 2024, will be facing off on CBS News in New York tomorrow. The debate starts at 9 p.m., and it should run about 90 minutes until 10:30. So this will be an extremely interesting matchup here, because these are two men who really have a dislike for each other. I mean, the way that Tim Walz, describes how dangerous the policies of the Republican ticket are, in his view, of course, really, demonstrates someone like Tim Walz's concern, really, about, how the morality, really, of people like J.D. Vance and Donald Trump. Then you've got J.D. Vance, who absolutely, just rips Tim Walz and Kamala Harris on every single issue. So it will be extremely interesting to see how they interact with each other, because this is not someone like Donald Trump where we know how he speaks, and it's not someone like Kamala Harris. We have seen the debates, the 2019 primary debates, the vice presidential debates of 2024, of course. We sort of knew how she would act going into their presidential debate. But Tim Walz and J.D. Vance are people who haven't been in the national spotlight, at least not for too long. Tim Walz, for example, right? Until he was picked as VP, no one knew who this guy Tim Walz was. The debates that he held were just small little venues, the most recent ones being in 2022 when he was running for re-election for governor. Now, J.D. Vance, on the other hand, he has gained some more prominence than Tim Walz in these recent years since he became a very influential senator. But despite that, many people don't have an opinion of him, but he has been much more outspoken than Tim Walz, and he certainly has a lot more experience with debates like this than does Tim Walz. So before we go into the specifics, everything like that, we have to set the stage, and the stage is set when it comes to the favorability. We know the favorability ratings of each of these men. Now, look at the percentages, because it is important when you add those up. What is that? 40 plus 36. That's a total of 76% of voters have an opinion at all of Tim Walz. And we'll get to J.D. Vance. It's not near 100% either. Quarter of voters, 1 in 4 voters, not having an opinion of a running mate. That's extremely important, it's important to the debate, because this means that the debate is going to be forming a lot of opinions about each of these candidates among voters, among battleground voters or whichever voters. But anyway, looking at the favorability rating of Tim Walz, he is above water by 3.7%. He and Kamala Harris are both above water in their favorability ratings. Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are both below water. Now let's take a look at J.D. Vance, right above him on the drop-down. So again, Walz is plus 3.7. Vance is minus 11. So while J.D. Vance was more favorable than unfavorable by 3 points, J.D. Vance is more unfavorable than he is favorable, and it's not even close. It's not like 3%, no, it's by 11%, and even worse for him, we see that even more voters than Tim Walz, for Tim Walz, have already made an opinion of him, of J.D. Vance. As you can see, when you add those totals up, it comes to around 80%. That's even, well, not much more, but whatever. It's even more than Tim Walz. So, less people have an opportunity to form their first opinion on J.D. Vance, and already he's much more unfavorable. You just see every single poll shows him more unfavorable than favorable. It's just stark contrast with Tim Walz. Tim Walz is 14 points, almost 15 points more favorable. That's a lot, 15 points more favorable across the United States nationwide than is J.D. Vance. So people are going into this debate, Democrat, Republican, or Independent, whatever it may be, most of them are really liking Tim Walz, despite what they have heard about him, being a socialist or whatever, far left, whatever the Republicans say. They are going into this debate liking Tim Walz, liking his personality, how he acts, just being favorable of him because of who he is, or because of the case he has made to the American voters and what he has done in Minnesota, whatever it may be. And again, voters have responded very positively towards that, and they have responded very negatively towards towards JD Vance. And this is a bigger picture. It's more important because at the end of the day, any election, when you have people like Donald Trump and JD Vance, two very interesting characters, on a presidential ticket, the election will be about character. 2016, absolutely, the election was about character. Donald Trump appealed to how he spoke about trade. I mean, it mixed in policy, but how he spoke about the issues. But it was more the way that he spoke it, and how he his rhetoric of draining the swamp and all that. That greatly appealed to white working class voters in the Rust Belt. That's how he won the election. Joe Biden won in 2020 because he was the return to normalcy candidate. It's always about character. Very few times do we look back in history and say, wow, if that candidate had a different position on this certain policy or these few policies, then they would have won that state or the election. But we always go back in history and say, the type of campaign that they run, how they speak, just their overall character, their moral stance, that can really affect election outcomes. And again, any election with Donald Trump is going to be about character. That is for certain. And this article is very old, but it relates to Donald Trump's conviction. And whatever. I'm not talking about the conviction especially, but I'm just trying to make the point of all these, occurrences that have been happening. Regarding Donald Trump, he was convicted. He was found liable. He's a convicted felon. He was found liable of sexual assault. The list goes on and on. You've got January 6th, where he's still blamed for inciting that insurrection. Donald Trump is just such an interesting character, and it's going to be about his character. A lot of people have issues with Donald Trump's character. I believe much more than they did in 2016 and even 2020 probably, now that he's a convicted felon and everything like that. And that will be very prominent in voters' minds. So, point I'm trying to make is that this matters. Favorability ratings matter. Polls are one thing, but when they're so close, when it's a toss-up, whatever, when polls are this close as they are, they're a toss-up. But favorability ratings really help us get an understanding. And of course, VP picks typically don't sway elections, but in such a close election, these ones could. I honestly think that this will be the most influential VP debate, maybe ever, because you've got these two characters who are definitely going to go into a fierce battle in an election that's so about character. And it's very easy. These are two men. I don't know how to explain it well, but these are two men where it's very easy, I feel at least, to develop an understanding of them when it comes to not about their policies, but to grasp how you feel about them is what I'm trying to say. These are two men where you can very quickly get the vibe, who you like and who you dislike. Typically, as is revealed in the polls, people naturally like Tim Walz and they naturally dislike JD Vance. So we'll see what plays out in the debate, what could change these things. That will be extremely important. The favorability ratings are more important than people think to look at, because in 2016, the one thing that maybe did indicate that Donald Trump actually did have a chance were the favorability ratings. People hated Hillary Clinton, and they hated Donald Trump just as much. It was just about tied in their favorability ratings, Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. So that could be a telltale sign of what the election outcome is. And we could talk about the presidential race too. Kamala Harris, much more favorable now. She has skyrocketed than Donald Trump. She has skyrocketed her favorability rating numbers. And when you've got, her as well as Tim Walz absolutely demolishing JD Vance and Donald Trump in terms of their favorability to unfavorability ratings, that could really make an impact in an election that is such about character. So I don't know. I don't want to, when it comes to the debate, I don't want to make predictions, right? But we can talk about how important it is. I think that Tim Walz will crush JD Vance. That is just my opinion. And it would be really important. So CBS News, they're, of course, hosting the debate. They released a poll. Why are you watching the VP debate? This is a poll among registered voters. And look at that. The top one 87% to learn something new about the candidates. Wow, 87%. I mean, sure, most people are going to say that even though they know who they're going to vote for, but still, people care about learning about these candidates. Then at the bottom, yes, it's only 24%, but that question is important to help decide your vote. Very few people are undecided right now, right? We're going into election day. Most people know who they're going to vote for, but 24% is extremely substantial. And this is important, and I forgot to mention this when I said this is the most influential VP debate ever, because this is the last debate, presidential or vice presidential, before the election. This will be the last nationwide, any sort of debate among Trump, Harris, Vance, or Tim Walz. Harris and Trump are not debating again. Trump backed out. So this will be the last, this will be the last impact that voters feel in these nationwide, very important high-stakes debates. This will be the last one before the election, so it will really stick in voters' minds, at least more than other VP debates when then you have another presidential debate after, and it just gets lost, right? It just gets lost in the memory of people, and it ends up not mattering, but it being, last, that's really important. And also, JD Vance, whatever, favorability, I do have this poll. Harris crushes Vance. She beats him by 21 points. People hate JD Vance. They absolutely hate him. Harris beats him by 21 when she only is beating Trump on average by like 3 or 4 or 2. People hate JD Vance. I mean, 37, that's abysmal. Getting that when, that's so many Republicans saying, yeah, I'd vote for Harris over Vance, even though I'm voting for Trump. So Vance absolutely weighs down the ticket. We'll see how he responds in this debate. But I think that Tim Walz will win the debate. I don't know if it's going to be a blowout, but I think that, he will just be much more likable and come across better and more positively to voters than JD Vance will. So thank you all for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to comment down suggestions for videos and what you think on this situation. Subscribe as well, and I will see you all next time.